She always got what she wanted, until she wanted someone already taken. The scent of cologne lingered in the air, as Jade Monroe, daughter of billionaire magnate Desmond Monroe, strutted into her father's glass-walled office tower. Her stiletto heels echoed like war drums against the marble floors her entrance. As usual, a performance, but today, her eyes caught something different, something forbidden. A mantle, rugged, mid-30s, in a crisp navy suit stood reviewing marketing blueprints with Desmond's assistant. Jade's breath hitched. His name? Marcus, married, loyal, or so the office whispers said. Jade, spoiled by life's luxuries and immune to rejection, leaned against her father's desk with a smirk. Who's the new guy? She purred. No one dared tell her no. Not even fate. Within a week, her flirtation turned into calculated pursuit. Every smile, every gift, every sultry look chipped at Marcus's defenses like waves against stone. At home, Marcus's wife Amira noticed the change missed calls, late nights, and a heart growing cold. She had sacrificed her dreams to build his. Yet now, silence was her thanks. One rainy night, Jade's name rolled off Marcus's tongue as he whispered into his phone behind closed doors, and Amira, from the kitchen hallway, heard it all. He left love behind, not for freedom, but for illusion. Amira stood motionless in their dim hallway, the lights flickering as the storm raged outside. Rain tapped relentlessly against the windows, like the thought slamming into her skull. I'm not coming home, Marcus had said coldly over the phone. I've met someone. I'm going to marry her. Her knees buckled. She confronted him the moment he walked through the door, soaked in rain and secrets. Who is she? Amira asked, voice trembling. Jade, he replied without remorse. She's Desmond Monroe's daughter. The words cracked through Amira like thunder. 3 days later, the divorce papers came. Marcus packed his things, left her with nothing but memories, and moved into the Monroe penthouse, flaunting his new life. Amira's boutique once, her pride, had already been sold months ago to fund Marcus's business degree. When the skies opened again, pouring grief over the city, Amira found herself evicted, shivering beneath a half-broken shelter at a bus stop. That's when Desmond Monroe's black Rolls-Royce slowed beside her. He didn't know she was connected to his daughter, but destiny doesn't ask permission. Desmond rolled down his tinted window and looked at the drenched woman crouched near the sidewalk. She was shivering, soaked to the bone, clutching a worn handbag to her chest. Something about her eyes' pride, buried beneath pain, compelled him to pause. You all right, miss? He asked, stepping out with his umbrella. Amira hesitated. Just. Had a bad night? She murmured. Desmond extended a hand. Let me offer you a dry place and a hot meal. I've got space at my guest house. In silence, she accepted. Wrapped in warmth inside the mansion's guest wing, Amira sipped tea by the fire. Her story spilled out. How she'd once owned a boutique, how she funded her husband's rise, only to be discarded like old fabric. Desmond listened intently, never once suspecting the man in question was the one currently dating his daughter. But fate, patient and cruel, was only beginning to unravel its twisted design. Sometimes the villain wears the face of your own reflection. Jade admired herself in the mirror of her high-rise suite, draped in silk and privilege. Marcus stepped out of the shower behind her, towel slung low on his hips, freshly shaved, freshly hers. She smirked at her conquest. The man who once belonged to someone else now wore her name, like a designer tag, but the high was fleeting. That morning, during brunch with her father, Jade casually dropped Marcus's name. He's moving in permanently, she said, swirling her mimosa. Desmond paused, fork midair. Marcus, your new boyfriend. His brow tightened. Where have I heard that name? The name echoed in Desmond's mind later that evening, as he reviewed Amira's story again. Her ex-husband had been a marketing executive, left her for a younger woman. The timing matched. So did the name and Jade. Jade had mentioned Marcus. A chill snaked through Desmond's spine. The truth, once awakened, refuses to sleep quietly. Amira stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of Desmond's estate, overlooking the glimmering skyline. Though warmth surrounded her, her heart still wore winter. She had barely spoken in 2 days, until Desmond entered with a file in hand. "I have something to ask," he said, placing a photo on the table. It was Marcus, smiling beside Jade at a charity gala. Amira's breath hitched. "Is this the man who left you?" Her silence answered everything. Desmond's hands curled into fists. "He's my daughter's boyfriend." It was as if the room split into half revelation, half rage. Amira looked down, ashamed, but Desmond stepped forward. Gently, "You were the wife?" he asked. She nodded. "Then you deserve justice." Suddenly, Amira was no longer a victim in Desmond's eyes. She was a woman wronged, and he, a man with power and motive, had just found his reason to act up to expose the truth. Sometimes you must let the lie take center stage. Desmond threw a grand gala, that weekend and opulent masquerade set in his private ballroom, reserved for those with status and secrets. Gold drapes shimmered. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in elegance. Guests arrived cloaked in silk, their masks hiding everything but their intentions. Among them, jade and emerald satin, Marcus in a midnight tuxedo, but at the top of the grand staircase, descending like poetry in motion, stood Amira. No mask, number, shame, just resilience wrapped in grace. Gasps rippled. Marcus froze mid-sip. Jade's jaw dropped. Desmond stepped forward, announcing to the crowd, "This is Amira, our guest of honor." All eyes turned. The ex-wife had returned, but not as a castaway. Tonight, she belonged to the host and Jade. She saw, for the first time, that the woman Marcus had discarded was far from done. When a woman rises from ashes, she no longer fears the flame. Amira stood at the center of Desmond Monroe's glittering ballroom, her poise unnerving the very man who left her. Marcus gripped his champagne flute so hard it cracked. Jade's smirk faltered. "What is she doing here?" Jade hissed. Desmond's eyes swept over his daughter. "She's here because she belongs." The music resumed, but the air was tight with questions. Whispers floated like perfume across the marble floor. Amira walked through it all with elegance, her silver gown catching the light like armor. Later that night, Marcus cornered her near the bar. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. Amira looked him dead in the eye. "I'm not doing anything. You did." She walked away, leaving Marcus shaken for the first time. He realized she wasn't the same woman he'd left behind. Lies often, wore tuxedos and drank from crystal glasses. Jade could feel something slip in her confidence, her control, her father's approval. She had never seen Desmond speak so kindly to a woman who wasn't blood. Later that evening, she confronted Marcus. "Why do you look at her like that?" she demanded. Marcus stammered. "I don't." But he did, and Jade knew it. Desmond watched, the unraveling from afar. He had planned this gala for one purpose, to expose character. What he saw in Amira was grace. What he saw in Marcus was guilt, and what he saw in his daughter was ego unchecked. That night, Desmond called his lawyer. "I want everything reevaluated," he said. "The inheritance, the business, everything. The truth never asks permission. It rips the mask off mid-dance." 2 days after the gala, Desmond summoned Marcus and Jade to his study. "This will be brief," he said, sliding a manila envelope across the desk. Inside, photos, times, and receipts proof of Marcus's affair while still married. "Your loyalty was a lie," Desmond said to Marcus. "And your judgment," he said, turning to Jade, "is costing you everything." Jade's face flushed with humiliation. "Are you really siding with her?" Desmond leaned forward. "I'm siding with integrity. You brought a liar into our family." Marcus tried to defend himself. "She meant nothing when I left Amira. Jade was the upgrade." Desmond stood. "Then you're both downgraded." He had Marcus escorted out and revoked Jade's access to the corporate trust fund. The woman who once begged now had nothing to prove. Amira, now working as Desmond's design consultant, found solace in her growing independence. She had a wardrobe line launching under Monroe Industries and a quiet strength in her stride. No longer a guest, she was a force. Jade, meanwhile, faced life without staff, without cards, without the glimmer of Monroe wealth. Her days shrunk from shopping sprees to budgeted breakfasts. Marcus, disgraced and unemployed, began showing signs of desperation. One night, he knocked on Amira's studio office. "Help me," he pleaded. "I made a mistake." Amira didn't even flinch. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice." And she shut the door taut sometimes. Redemption wears a suit and sits at the head of the table. Desmond invited Amira to a private dinner on the rooftop of his luxury hotel. Candlelight flickered against the skyline. "You've changed the energy in this place," he said, "and you've changed me." Amira smiled cautiously. "I didn't mean to." Desmond leaned in. "But you did, and I'm glad." Their laughter carried into the stars. He didn't touch her hand. He didn't lean too close. But the silence between sentences said everything. When he walked her to the car, she paused. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. Desmond replied, "It's hard. Not to, when you shine like that. Even mirrors lie when they're cracked by pride." Jade stared at her reflection in a cracked vanity mirror in her rental flat. Her nails were chipped, her hair unkempt. She was no longer the darling of the Monroe dynasty, and where Samira had become everything Jade once believed she was meant to be. Driven by rage, Jade stormed into her father's office. "She's using you." Desmond didn't look up. "No, you're the one who used me, and you wasted it. I'm your daughter." He finally looked at her, eyes cold, then started acting like it. Jade left with tears, threatening but pride still intact. For now, some truths can only be understood when written in regret. Amira received a letter postmarked from a tiny town she hadn't heard of since childhood. Inside, her mother's handwriting. "I saw you on TV. In that dress, you look like the woman I always hoped you'd become." Tears welled in Amira's eyes as she read the message. Her mother had been absent for decades, but somehow still watching. Desmond found her that evening on the balcony, holding the letter. "That smile, it hides a storm," he said. Amira turned to him. "I thought losing everything would break me, but it built me." Desmond nodded. "It's why I admire you." And he meant every word. When a man sees your scars and still kneels, he's not just asking for your hand. Desmond invited Amira on a weekend retreat, quiet, peaceful, wrapped in pine trees and humming lakes. On their last night, beneath a sky so clear it felt painted, he dropped to one knee. "I've built empires, Amira, but none of it means anything without someone to build for." Amira gasped. "Desmond, no pressure, no rush, just truth." She said nothing, just wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. It was hope. Just when healing begins, the past comes, knocking with dirt under its nails. Marcus showed up at the Monroe estate unannounced. Security tried to block him, but Amira agreed to see him one last time. "I know I messed up," he said, eyes sunken, shirt wrinkled. "But you were always the real thing." Amira raised an eyebrow. "And now that the fake is gone, you remember? I want you back," he said desperately. "We could fix this." She shook her head. "You left a wife for a fantasy. I became a woman without you, and I love the woman I am now." Desmond walked in silently, placing his hand on Amira's shoulder. "You should leave," he told Marcus. "You no longer belong in her story. When a woman heals, the world watches but when she glows." They write about it. 2 days after Marcus's failed plea, headlines erupted. Monroe heiress dumped ex-wife turned fiancé. Amira Grace, from betrayed to billionaire's bride Jade, threw her phone across the room. Every blog, every outlet, every social page showcased Amira's elegance beside Desmond's commanding presence. They were calling her the new face of Monroe legacy. At brunch, patrons whispered about Jade, once envied. She now wore pity like cheap perfume. Marcus, meanwhile, was nowhere to be found. Rumors swirled: gambling debts, unpaid rent, a failed startup scam. Amira saw the headlines, but didn't let them define her. "Let them talk," she said, sketching out designs for her next collection. "My story isn't theirs to narrate anymore. Blood may run thicker than water, but ego drowns just the same." Desmond invited Jade to lunch at the country estate. She arrived guarded, expecting another lecture, but instead, He set down a journal. Your mother's, he said softly. She left it behind. I think it's time you saw who you used to be. Jade flipped through the pages, childhood drawings, dreams, quotes her mother wrote about parenting a little girl filled with fire. Tears blurred her vision. I don't hate you, Jade, Desmond said. I hate what entitlement turned you into. Jade nodded slowly, eyes on the past. For the first time, her silence felt like surrender. From heartbreak to headlines her fabric now told her story. Amira's new collection debuted at Monroe Industries' Fall Fashion Gala. The theme, resilience rewoven, models strutted in bold, structured silhouettes, sharp lines, flowing edges, rich textures. Every stitch was survival. Every color, rebirth. Desmond sat front row, pride shining through his cool composure. When Amira walked out for her final bow, the crowd stood, not just because she was the designer, but because she was the symbol. Betrayed wife, business visionary, and now, the woman beside the billionaire. Jade stood at the back in quiet awe. She had to admit, Amira earned every bit of this. Even she clapped. Sometimes, the ghosts we run from were cologne and carry flowers. Marcus reappeared again. This time, at Amira's private show, after party, wearing a pressed shirt and holding a bouquet of white roses. He approached slowly, apologetically. I watched your show from my laptop, he said. You were breathtaking. Amira gave a soft smile. Thank you, Marcus, but I'm not the same woman you left. I know. That's why I came, he said. Hopeful. Desmond arrived seconds later, placing his hand gently on Amira's waist. Enjoy the view, Desmond said to Marcus, because that's all you're ever getting again. Marcus nodded slowly, stepped back, and left for good. Some proposals aren't answered with words, but with tears and trembling hands. Weeks passed. Desmond waited patiently. Never pushed, never hinted. He let love grow without pressure. Then one night, under the stars, where they first sat alone, Amira arrived at his lake estate in a deep green coat. Her hands were trembling. She didn't speak. She just opened the small velvet box he'd once given her, slipped the ring on her own finger, and looked up with glassy eyes. Desmond pulled her close, forehead against hers. That's a yes, he whispered. They nodded, heart pounding like applause, and in the silence between them, an entire future began to unfold. The most powerful storms are born in silence, and announced without warning. No press release, no flashy engagement party, just a whisper between two hearts. Desmond and Amira decided. A private wedding. Small, sacred, secret. Only a handful knew. Jade, now grounded and humbled, was among them. She approached Amira one evening as they reviewed floral palettes. I was cruel to you, Jade confessed, because I thought loving my father meant protecting his world from anyone else. Amira looked up. I never wanted to take your place. I know, Jade said, but I needed to lose everything to see it. They sat in silence for a long time, two women once divided by pride, now bridged by truth. When two broken people say I do, the universe holds its breath. The ceremony was held deep in the pine forest behind Desmond's lakeside estate. No altar, just trees, light, and a circle of loved ones. Amira wore ivory silk, soft as wind, strong as armor. Desmond wore black, simple and classic, but his eyes carried the weight of every chapter that led to this one. When they exchanged vows, there was no trembling, only truth. I saw your pain, Desmond said, and loved you through it. And I saw your power, Amira replied, but loved the man beneath it. They kissed beneath falling petals and distant starlight. For once, their story wasn't about loss, it was about becoming whole. Power means nothing until you pull up a chair for someone who once had none. At the first board meeting, post-sweating, Desmond introduced his wife, not as a +1 but as partner. Meet Amira Monroe, co-chair of the Monroe Foundation and creative director of our new philanthropic division, he announced. Eyebrows raised, whispers circulated, but no one dared question it. Amira took her seat at the table, her voice calm, her notes crisp. She pitched a proposal: scholarships for single mothers, seed funding for minority-owned startups, Real change, not charity. Even the coldest executives couldn't argue with the clarity of her vision. This wasn't nepotism. This was revolution to move forward. Sometimes you must bury the ghosts even, if they're still breathing. Marcus sent one final letter. No demands, just inked regret. I wanted you to fail, he wrote. Not because I hated you, but because I couldn't stand watching you rise. Amira read the letter aloud to Desmond over tea. When she finished, she folded it once, then, again, and tossed it into the fireplace. Desmond looked at her. Was that closure? No, Amira said. That was cleansing. In that moment, she didn't feel pain. Just peace. The ashes curled and the fire ran with them. The last hold Marcus ever had on her life. Sometimes healing is a photograph. You no longer have to look at with sorrow. Jade found an old photo tucked behind a book in her childhood room. Desmond and her mother at the beach. All smiles, all sunlight. She stared at it, remembering what love looked like when it was pure. Later that day, she walked into Amira's office and quietly hung the photo on the wall. This belonged here, she said, so I can remember where we started and where we never want to go back. Amira smiled gently. I'm glad you're here now. Jade nodded. So am I. Outside, the Monroe estate glowed not with wealth but with warmth. For the first time in years, it finally felt like home. Sometimes joy begins as a whisper. Wrapped in cotton and heartbeat, Amira sat on the garden bench with a soft smile tugging at her lips, fingers tracing the hem of a tiny, cream-colored blanket folded in her lap. Desmond stepped outside, raising an eyebrow. That's new. She looked up, radiant. I took a test this morning, she said, voice trembling. I'm pregnant. Desmond's knees almost buckled. He dropped beside her, cup in her face. Are you sure? She nodded through laughter and tears. Positive. The moment swelled between them to people who had once known nothing but loss. Now gifted with a beginning neither dared to imagine. The richest inheritance is a name, spoken with love. Desmond called a meeting with his estate lawyer. No boardroom, no suits, just a fireside and family. I want to restructure the will, he said. Jade will inherit full partnership rights. Amira and I will build the legacy, fund together. And our child, he smiled at Amira, will carry the Monroe name with honor, not entitlement. Jade nodded. This time, I'll earn it. There were no arguments, only purpose, and when Desmond stood to shake hands with the lawyer, he placed one hand over Amira's stomach. For the first time in my life, he said, this feels like wealth. Redemption doesn't always knock it, sometimes whispers from the shadows. One rainy afternoon, Amira found a woman standing at the estate gate's umbrella, torn, face familiar. Her mother. I saw the news, she said. I know I don't deserve anything, but I needed to see you. Amira stood, frozen. After years of silence, abandonment, and pain, her mother's voice sounded softer than she remembered. I didn't know how to love you back then, but I'm proud of you now, the woman said. Amira opened the gate, not with trust, not with blind forgiveness, but with a heart that had grown wide enough to let healing pass through. The final pages of our lives are often written in the smallest rooms. Amira sat alone in the nursery, sun filtering through pale gold curtains. On the rocking chair was a leather-bound journal, Desmond's gift, labeled Letters to Our Child. She opened it. Page 1. Dear little one, you don't know yet how powerful your mother is. One day, you'll see her not just as mom, but as the woman who taught me how to love again. Amira wept softly, her hand resting on her round belly. Outside, Desmond watched through the glass, his heart bursting at the sight of the family he almost didn't know he needed. And just like that, the story they thought was ending had only just begun. A year later, the Monroe estate was alive with laughter and lavender blooms. Guests arrived not for a gala, but for a garden dedication, the Amira Grace Foundation. Jade ran logistics, clipboard in hand, giving orders with a smile. Desmond held their baby girl, swaddled in white and named Hope. Amira stepped forward to speak. This isn't a story about betrayal, she said to the crowd. It's about becoming. The applause rose like spring wind, and as Desmond kissed her temple, The sun bathed them in golden light. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. This was the first page of forever. Thank you for watching. Please let us know where you are watching from, so we can say thanks. Please don't forget to subscribe.